don't worry guys, the good news is no death by PowerPoint because I didn't make any. So my laziness will be your reward. And actually I was trying to sprinkle comments from the ACGME perspective and ADROP throughout the day. So I thought what I'd do instead is just torture you with my observations from the day and what I think we could leave here with, and also some of the I guess, thoughts I have about the future and where we need to be thinking about our next set of efforts, taking all of the incredible work that was shared today and a lot of the things that you guys probably didn't share that you're working on, and how do we tailor it for the future. So just again, this will be brief, I promise, but one thing I think that is a key that came up early on is standardization, right? So standardization of a lot of the way in which we approach educating our trainees, educating our staff, our colleagues, and our patients with the work we saw today. And I think what vehicle that would best be addressed through, so getting SCARA, ADROP, and ROECSG on board and in a room such that all of the work that you guys are creating that you want to export, that you want to become sort of the national guide, and of course we can cross international borders as well with our friends from Canada and Europe that we have here. But thinking about why are we constantly reinventing the wheel, and why can't we focus these types of efforts as just the curriculum, that's what you get when you enter radiation oncology residency, and then the energy that all of us have in a limited quantity that should be spent on bedside teaching, on observation. I think one of the things that I rarely have time to do is actually observe my residents in action. And there are tricks to that because patients, often will talk to the faculty member and not to the resident if you're in the room. But, there are methods of, with cameras, with two-sided windows, with standardized patients. There's all sorts of things we could be doing to focus more on the skills that you can't get out of a textbook or that you can't get from a YouTube video. And if we were to enable our educators to spend more time on that, wouldn't that be amazing? And I don't have a clue why physics and rad bio should be taught in 7 different ways at 7 different institutions. As far as I know, a gray is a gray, and you should be able to figure that out with one cohesive group. And I think that egos should not actually even factor into it, because at the end of the day, a lot of the folks teaching this would love that collaborative spirit. So that's a thought, utilizing our resources wisely and efficiently. I just want to mention that we had an ADROP retreat in the fall that some of you were at with the program directors, and we're starting from that a shared pool resource pilot. And I already have about, I think, we have 3 working groups. One is bioinformatics, one is on milestone competencies, and a third is on, I can't even think what the third one is on at the moment. Sorry, but the idea is that if you're at an institution where you have expertise in, say, bioinformatics, why does that expertise only have to live there? Could there be a way that you could create a curriculum that's accessible and not necessarily require travel, but that could be available to rad-onc trainees on the other end of the country who have interest in participating in this? So this is something that we're going to try with these working groups to develop, but it's in the exact same spirit of what we're talking about here. Right? I think engaging institutional strengths, right? Leveraging institutional strengths. You happen to have a tremendous standard. The other one is simulation and teaching through simulation. So if you happen to have a simulation center at your medical school that's on campus, that's more accessible to you, and perhaps another institution doesn't, how do we leverage that? So more to come on that from ADROP. I think whatever we do, as I mentioned before, we need to tie to milestones or competencies or some metric that we find meaningful, but also that will create the buy-in. And a lot of young people in this room, but there's even younger people coming in the future. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, these folks are going to go through medical school having potentially never gone to a classroom, only ever done small group teamwork, and then gone straight to the clinic and worked with patients. And virtual reality is exactly how they are learning and will be learning. So for the generation to come, it will be very difficult, I think, to have people coming out of medical school trained in that VR mentality, and everything has to be 7 minutes and digestible little nuggets, otherwise forget it. What was your view page, 3 minutes? 3.7? Yeah, so just to look at a case. So I think thinking about how when they become residents, I don't know that we can ask them to take a step back realistically. So although now we're doing all of this, thinking about how to adapt it into that realm will be important. And I think a potential pitfall of standardization, the one that I can think of is, if we do this, then we have to ask ourselves, are we striving for competency or for excellence? And so if we provide a minimum level of quality to programs through our curricula, we're looking for competence, but I think we want to still leave room for excellence. And that's where Dan's point about if you're not stressed to some level, what makes you, reach for the stars. And I think we pick applicants that we think will do that, but human nature being what it is, we'll just have to be cognizant, I think, of the potential to lead to complacency if we automate too much. And then my other general theme that I noticed today, or that I want to discuss, is about expanding and protecting the denominator, by which I mean this idea of our workforce, of radiation oncology, supply over demand, right? And the obvious answer is, well, just, make sure you don't train too many folks, manage the supply. But how do we increase the demand? How do we increase the number of jobs in radiation oncology? It's not about just adding more centers, it's about expanding the scope of what we do. And the scope of what we do needs to include global health. It needs to include palliative oncology, so that terrible, perspective that med-oncs have of us, which is, really pretty, I think, upsetting to a lot of us that do work beyond 9 to 5 and do have longitudinal care experience. Just getting ourselves out there and incorporating that, I feel like that's our charge, okay? So the chairs all want, their departments to succeed, but at the end of the day, it comes through education and training, right? Can't get the research and the clinical care without the education and training. So one of the things that we should probably be thinking about is how do we apply and a lot of you already are, but how do we apply a lot of what we're coming up with to bioinformatics, to global health, to palliative care, and having specific curricula just for that, if we don't already. So just, lending our focus there. So, and QI, McGill's QI program was a great example of that. Efforts like IROC are a great example of sort of making sure that we have an opportunity to diversify our training and not just educate on the route-on principles. But once we feel comfortable with that, and we've standardized that, have we enabled ourselves time and resources and effort to go beyond just the everyday stuff that ACGME tells us we need to do? And then the last thing is educating our colleagues, starting at the med school level, not just to recruit. Actually, we don't need to recruit them all, right? We need to recruit 1%, but we need to demystify radiation oncology with the rest of the med school graduates, again, to maintain that denominator so that our specialty doesn't suffer from, to Tom's point, the reason fewer people are applying is there is this huge concern, whether they like it or not, immunotherapy is going to make radiation obsolete. Anyone that knows anything will tell you that's not true, but this is what medical students believe. Radiology outsourcing, okay, so that's what's happening with radiation oncology because they think we're the same specialty. And then they hear this from their internal medicine mentors. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the relative lack of understanding of our field hurts us, and so educating our colleagues is as important as educating our own, and that's what I would say. And that includes administrators and societies, because if they don't lobby for our cause, we won't get the funding and the power that we need. So those are just my general thoughts.